Let's dive into the discussions shaping the nation.
Deputy Duncan Smith.
Thank you, Las Cian Corla. I just want to welcome these statements. I made a request for these statements at the Business Committee 2 weeks ago, and they're very quickly put on the agenda, which I think highlights the importance that I think we all hold this issue, the regard with which we hold this issue in this House. The 1989 academic paper, The End of History by Francis Fukuyama, and its subsequent book, The End of History and The Last Man in 1992, central kind of argument is that Western liberal democracies have kind of won out, and the universalisation of them has kind of brought a natural end to centuries-long evolution in terms of how humans govern their countries, and indeed how that operates throughout the world. I mean, and that article and book has been subject to an awful lot of critique and analysis over the years, not least for its failure to maybe look at the threats of Islamism or religious fundamentalism or tribalism. But one critique, I think, which hasn't occurred because no one expected it, was the challenges to Western liberal democracies from the very standard bearer of Western liberal democracy, which is the United States. And this is something that we've seen accelerated in the last 2 months, the prelude to which was the 4 years of the Trump administration between 2016 and 2020, and indeed his election campaign last year. But it's happening before our very eyes. Again, the central premise of that book is that Western liberal democracies are less likely to enter into conflict with each other, less likely to enter into wars with each other. But we have seen an escalation in conflict between traditional allies, albeit through trade in the first instance, be it between the United States and Canada, the United States and the EU, threats towards the annexation of Greenland, talk about the Panama Canal. Don't want to go too far ahead, but concerns about what might be done to the UN as the US certainly withdraws support for it. What the US has already done in the pausing of US aid, which is amongst it's the most callous acts of the last couple of months, and the impact that's having already in terms of deaths and illness and weakening protections against famine and flood and drought. All this is happening right now, whilst the headlines, and rightly so, are going towards the diminishing security in relation to Ukraine with the continued war after the invasion of Russia, and indeed what's happening in Gaza, which over the last 48 hours been described by the Israeli Prime Minister as the beginning or the start. But the start of what? We've had 16, 17 months of genocide, of utter destruction, of barbarism. And this is just the start. Then it seems to be the start of what will be the final push of the Palestinian people out of Gaza, at the same time as the UN has reported the acceleration in illegal settlements on the West Bank. Israel are now operating in the most unfettered manner that they've ever done in their entire history. And this has been given the green light by the Trump administration. And we point to that AI-generated video of the grotesquely labelled Gaza Riviera. But that was a very serious piece of social media content, because it effectively, along with the words of what Donald Trump had said, has given that green light that there will be no ramifications to the state of Israel if they push the Palestinian people off what remains of their lands in Gaza and the West Bank. In fact, it said, go ahead. It did so in the most grotesque, public, and indeed horribly modern manner in terms of that video. So we are witnessing this before our very eyes, not least as well, to add to this, the weakening of democracy, the questioning of elections, both within the United States from the president and indeed elections in other countries around the world that have strong democracies, promoting the far right in countries such as Germany, with J.D. Vance promoting the AfD. All this makes the world more insecure from a direction that we never felt. And there is look, I mean, The primacy of Western liberal democracies has not been without its problems and without its challenges. It has, it has also developed great inequalities throughout the world, as well as developing and bringing peace and stability, and a decrease in wars and firming up countries as allies post Second World War, who would have traditionally been enemies for centuries. But this attack on Western liberal democracies, this attack on the West from the United States, is making the world more insecure. When the President of the United States feels more comfortable in the company of autocrats, be it in North Korea, be it in Russia or elsewhere, than he does within the United Nations or within traditional allies in the European Union, it is not parliamentary hyperbole from the very privileged position we're in Ireland to say that the world is changing before our very eyes. Maybe now, when we look back on this period, we will see that this is another so-called end of history happening before our very eyes. I do believe it is that serious. Only last night we saw the White House give control, put out that they should be given control of Ukraine's energy infrastructure as part of ongoing peace talks. This is incredible. Not only do they want to take away the security supports for Ukraine, leaving them more open to attack and invasion, they also want to harvest the natural resources and the infrastructure of that country. It is absolutely horrific to think that this is taking place before our very eyes, and the EU is powerless at this moment to stop it. The precedent that's been set here is incredibly dangerous for global stability and continues to creep into any conflict that the US is involved in. The Trump administration is seemingly hell-bent on being transactional in nature with traditional allies. But what does transactional in nature mean? Transactional to what end? I would posit that the transactional nature of the Trump administration to this point seems to be to weaken the strength of democracies in Europe and throughout the world who have traditionally been US allies. He sees democracy and strong democracies and real freedoms as threats. I think we need to see clarity from our government once again in terms of the Occupied Territories Bill. If I could just move to that for a moment. Yesterday, the Taoiseach stated the bill was on the legislative agenda, despite reports claiming the opposite from time in the US last week. Again, I'm on record as saying that I think what the Irish state has done in terms of recognition of Palestine is not unimportant. In fact, I think it's very important. It's been recognised as such. I think the Occupied Territories Bill is in the overall scheme of things, a small measure, but nonetheless not an unimportant one. And I think it's something that this government should be supporting and promoting, and we should have clarity on. There's no doubt that Ireland is now in an incredibly precarious situation, with the looming threat of tariffs on the European Union set to disproportionately impact us. By all accounts, disgraced fighters now have more pull within the US administration than our own government, having sit-down meetings with national security advisors, secretaries of defence, and indeed the President himself, as well as that being amplified by that very President. We need to see the Irish Government further strengthen our relationships with our counterparts in the European Union, which we know are strong, and indeed with the Labour-led government in the United Kingdom. I was encouraged by the recent summit the Taoiseach and the Prime Minister held in Liverpool, and we must work to strengthen our bond, and we in Labour want to work with the government on this. In the most uncertain of times, it is with our like-minded friends in the international community that Ireland can find a firm footing. And indeed, we look at the new leader of the Liberal Party in Canada, who has proud Irish roots, and that's a relationship we must strive to grow in the coming months. International trade has long been a powerful driver of economic prosperity, and as a small open economy, our trade relationships with the US, the United States and beyond have helped fuel our growth and bolster the standard of living for millions of people in this country. Yet trade is not simply about economics. Trade is a tool of diplomacy and cooperation. Until recently, we in the Western world have looked at the mutual dependencies that trade has created to help foster peace and stability. But now, as I said, with President Trump, those sure footings have now become less sure. As an EU member state, Ireland is committed to multilateralism and a rules-based trade, and that will not change. Our participation in the single market has not only boosted our economic fortunes, but has also anchored us to our allies who share both our values of democracy, fairness and peace. But trade cannot thrive in a world of insecurity, and such a world has been created, such a world has has been created by Donald Trump in a manner that I think has caught us all by surprise. As we witness an increasing number of geopolitical challenges and the rise of hybrid threats, it is clear that national security is no longer confined to our borders. The interconnected nature of today's world means that events halfway across the globe can have direct and immediate impacts on our own security. This is particularly true in the digital age, where the security of our trade networks and critical infrastructure is under constant threat from cyber attacks, data breaches and disinformation campaigns. The hack on the HSE from Russia needs to serve as a constant reminder that the need of our global supply chains and our state services could be disrupted and manipulated is no longer a distant concern. To that end, we need to see the National Cyber Security Centre provided with greater investment and greater resources. At the moment, it is more reactive than proactive. That could change with proper funding and proper resourcing. In Ireland, we have a unique position. We're a small nation with a large global footprint, and our neutrality and independence has given us a distinctive voice on the world stage. But this is not a time for isolation. As I've already said, now is a time to double down on our relationships with like-minded countries, and it's a time to be bold and hold firm on our national values. While the tectonic plates of the international order shift, it is important to remember our proud history of neutrality and just how dearly the Irish people hold it. We have made clear our concerns in Labour in regard to any alterations to the triple lock and the potential long-term impacts that a change to the triple lock would have on our neutrality. That, however, does not mean we do not have a responsibility to increase our own security capacity. Indeed, I think it's important that I'm crystal clear on this matter. We have not taken our own security seriously enough. That starts from the paying conditions of our defence forces, and it goes all the way up to our lack of investment in sonar, military and detection capabilities. The book has to stop now, and there's no more room for complacency. We have seen the EU as a whole change almost overnight. The focus on defence now the key issue for a huge host of member states. And while we cannot and will not under any circumstances accept a role in the Common Defence Pact or any offensive actions involving Irish troops, we have a responsibility to get our own house in order from a security point of view. I've already raised my serious concerns over lack of investment in the National Cyber Security Centre, but the issue is much more widespread. Our defence forces themselves are nowhere near the level of personnel that we need, standing at 7,497 members. But I have to say I received a PQ response yesterday that was maybe the best example I have seen of government seeing an issue, having a solution, yet bungling its implementation. It refers to an underspend in our defence forces and to the tune of 197 million. This at a time when our defence forces are crying out for better paying conditions, which would help attract more people to our defence forces and help with retention. We in Labour feel there's an urgent need to ensure that our barracks and our associated facilities are upgraded and maintained. We also feel that there's a real opportunity to develop new housing on Defence Forces land for service members and their families. The Oireachtas and the Minister may know that I previously raised the pension issue facing so many members of our uniformed services in regard to the public sector single pension scheme, which needs to be amended to recognise the particular position of workers in these fast accrual professions. Again, this is another matter that impacts on retention, which ultimately has an upstream impact on our own security. I've used the word complacency already when talking about our attitude previously to defence. To be fair, the bill on that can't be squarely left at the government's door. The way in which successive governments have farmed out responsibility to our allies simply isn't sustainable. I, for one, do not want to have to rely on the Royal Air Force for detection capabilities for our own land, air and sea. But I also want to talk about the vulnerability of our undersea cables that run into Ireland, both to the United States, to Iceland, to the UK and indeed to Europe. I've been meeting with a number of experts in different specialities in this area since taking on this portfolio, and it's been made even more abundantly clear to me just how vulnerable our undersea cables are. We know that for a number of days recently, for example, a vessel as part of the Russian Shadow Fleet was off the coast of Cork for a number of days, literally just loitering over one of our strategic cables. That same vessel is now on its way to the Balkans, the Baltics, where we know Russian Shadow Fleet have dropped anchors to damage undersea cables. This is happening, and it can happen and will happen to us if we do not get our own house in order. On the issue of improving our monitoring technology, the 2024 Defence Policy Review was published and stated the immediate focus will be placed on the development of an integrated monitoring and surveillance system for air, land and sea domains. I know that the next form of fixed cycle defence review is to be initiated this year, but I think it's important that we are kept updated on the delivery of this system and if indeed the 2028 expected implementation date is accurate. As I've outlined, we in Labour are serious about improving our own defence and security, but at the heart of the issue is the need to improve paying conditions for our members of our defence forces. Only from those foundations can we achieve any of our further goals. We need to ensure that we protect our neutrality. The best thing we can do for European security at the moment is to ensure that Ireland is investing in our own neutrality and our own security, and I hope that this government take that seriously. Thank you.
Like, share, and subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.